let's get into our FAFSA form updates because I know that's something that you all want to talk about. Give me 1 second. My computer is doing something extremely wonky. Okay. Hold on, you all, for 1 second. I'm going to stop presenting for a second. Okay. 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 And Jessica, are we waiting until the end for questions?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's get into FAFSA updates. So there are some updates. Some of them are cosmetic. Some of them are going to be in the foreseeable future. Some of them are going to be happening in the next week or so. So we all are doing this presentation. It's perfect timing. So the new look and feel of FAFSA.gov, we're going to talk about. There's a more modernized look that's aligned with the mobile app. Sign and submit the SAR and corrections. We love acronyms. So there are updates to those various pieces of the FAFSA form. There are some minor IRS changes. There's some information that's changing as it results to household size and then eligibility for the form. Okay. So again, this is all part of something we call it a DCC or digital customer care experience. But again, users who are already logged into studentaid.gov will be able to see this new look and feel, and it's actually up now. But a lot of these will be incorporated with um, the new 22-23 form. So we talked about the new look and feel. So if you filled the FAFSA out last year, or even if you went in now, we had updated the FAFSA form with a new look and feel a couple of years ago. Well, we decided to do another update. The My Student Aid mobile app, I don't know if any of you have actually used our mobile app, has a lot of these updates. And so what we did is we just did the same updates to the desktop version so that it would align with the mobile app. So the old screenshot is on the left. The new screenshot of the new look and feel is just on the right. So again, just making it more customized so that it aligns with the My Student Aid mobile app for a more improved user experience. Okay, so here is one of the updates to the form. So at the end of the FAFSA, right, there is an FSA ID, which is your signature that you use to fill out and complete the form and sign the form. The student and the parent both need an FSA ID in order to, a separate FSA ID in order to fill out the form. So there's a terms of agreement page right before the sign and submit that you would sign. So what we've decided, instead of going to the end of the FAFSA form, when you sign that terms of agreement page, that will act as your signature for the form. So you no longer have to sign again at the end. So once you've signed the terms of agreement page, that will act as your signature. So the signature is not going away. It's just where you're providing the signature will now be used for it would now be used as your signature for the FAFSA. You won't be prompted again to sign the form. So for dependent students, both the parent and the student, like I just said, we will capture the signature there. Now, for independent students, it'll be the same thing. The students will again sign the terms of agreement page, and that signature will be used for the FAFSA form. So no need to go at the end and sign it again, which is nice. Again, hoping that people don't have to repeat the same thing over and over again. Now, the SAR, the student aid report. So once you complete the FAFSA, right, the student will receive a confirmation page first and foremost, and then they'll receive a student aid report. The student aid report, which is SAR, I know it sounds like it's a disease or something, but it is not, will provide an EFC, an expected family contribution. That's an index number the student will get, right, from the school based on what they put on the FAFSA form. The SAR also has potential information about what they will receive. It's not the financial aid award letter, but the SAR has different parts to it, right? So it's been redesigned because before it was still very antiquated so that you can navigate. So it used to be a whole page of everything. Now there are different sections of the SAR you can review, and hopefully you all can see the screenshot. On the left-hand side, it will be all the different sections. Now, you can still print off the SAR, which is really great. You can print the entire SAR, but you can go through various sections now. So we've again wanted to make it a more user-friendly experience when it comes to viewing the SAR. Okay. And then corrections. So I think some of you, if you haven't recognized, you can make corrections to the FAFSA form. People are like, oh my goodness, if I submit the FAFSA, I can't make corrections. You can absolutely make corrections. The way that we had the corrections page is that it was still antiquated. It looked like the old FAFSA, some of the old images. So now it looks updated with some of the design changes that we've made for it to be user friendly. Now with corrections, there's different parts. So what happened, I'm going to go to the next slide so you can see the image. So in the past, again, it had its own unique design. We've now updated it so that it looks like the rest of FAFSA.gov. Now, the other thing about corrections that I wanted to share is there's a new flow. So sometimes when you go into corrections, there's a lot of things you can correct. Some people want to add a college. Some people might want to update their personal information. Maybe there's a mistake. What we did was, instead of having to go through each part of the FAFSA form, we provided different sections or subsections where if you just want to update your college, you can put up to 10 colleges at a time. Let's say you want to add an 11th or 12th. You can do that. You can update that by, you can update the list by going to a particular section, okay? If you want to edit the FAFSA. And then if you want to print off the SAR, for some reason, people shared with us, they confused corrections with actually being the SAR, and they're two different things. So we created a tab where it's like, hey, if you want to view your SAR, you don't have to make corrections. If you just want to view your SAR, you can do that. So again, just trying to create a more user-friendly experience by providing some helpful updates to the FAFSA application. So for the IRS, there's two minimal changes. There's something called a Schedule 1. So a couple of years ago, the 1040A, 1040EZ, those were all replaced by something called a Schedule 1 question, and we had to follow the protocol that the IRS did. So for Schedule 1, there's something called cryptocurrency. So basically, any reference to virtual currency has just been removed. It's not really something that you would know unless it actually applies to you, but any reference to virtual currency has just been removed. Tax information is still absolutely needed. The Schedule 1 question is still there. The other thing is the 1040 NREZ. So that was a particular group of individuals. The IRS eliminated the 10EZ form, so there's been confusion about an NREZ form. So again, it's just removing that no longer exists. So we again are just following the same protocol. So any reference to that form is being removed for the parent and student financial aid section. So the IRS removes stuff. We've got to follow the same protocol. That's all that is. Okay. Okay. So this is a big one. So eligibility updates. So starting with the new FAFSA cycle, drug convictions and the selective service. So I'm sure you all may or may not be aware, when you start filling out the FAFSA, it asks for males, are you registered with the selective service? And if they said no, they had to select yes in order to proceed. So now what's happening is part of the FAFSA Simplification Act. The first thing is so a male applicant under the age of 26 had to fill the form out. So now the registration status doesn't matter. So let me say this. I was getting mumbled because I was trying to think about it. You will still see the question in this upcoming cycle, but they can say no if they're registered and they'll still be able to proceed. Before, you weren't able to proceed. In future cycles, we are hoping that that question will no longer be there. But for this upcoming cycle, you will see it, but it will not impact the EFC. So that is the main thing, is that it's not going to impact the EFC in both instances. Same thing for the drug conviction. So for the drug conviction question, if you were receiving financial aid in there was a drug conviction involved, your aid would either you would either not qualify or would be able to receive a partial amount of financial aid. So again, the drug conviction piece is no longer applicable. So if you receive a drug conviction, it will no longer affect the eligibility. So this is part of the FAFSA Simplification Act. Let me also say this. I'm just sharing this with you all so that you know drug convictions and selective service registration will no longer impact a student's EFC. The financial aid offices at the schools are aware, okay? So it's not like you need to tell them, hey, by the way, they know. They are aware that this is now a new law, part of the FAFSA Simplification Act, okay? So when they see the questions, and please let people know, even if there is a drug conviction, some people were hesitant, they can still fill out the FAFSA It won't impact their EFC. So that's a big deal because a lot of people um, were impacted by this type of change, and now it's no longer there. Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you all as well. Okay, so there are some additional updates regarding household size. So again, this was another question that we were receiving regarding household size. People were getting confused about who was actually in my household, what what people count as being part of the household size. So what I want to share with you all is we've created a space where once you answer certain questions, there will be a table that will be displayed to share how many people are in the household size. So the question you're going to get is, does the student have dependents? So if the student says they have dependents, they're going to ask, and it's very possible, the number of dependents, and then it's going to ask how many people are, and I think you all can see the screenshot. Hopefully you can. How many people receive more than half support? If they see that question, I'm going to go to the next slide, and they click yes, and they put in the number of people, there's going to be a table that shows the student's household size, and it'll basically calculate the household size. Currently, I believe there wasn't a table. People would put in numbers, it would calculate it, but it wouldn't be as clear as the table. So I think that the household size, once it's been determined, the information will display automatically. Now, if you are independent, where there is, I'm sorry, if you answer no to the question, then it'll automatically again calculate the information for you. So just know there's a table now that whether you have people that you provide more than half support to, it'll calculate. If you don't, it'll only ask you certain questions. So it's almost like a skip logic. But in the end, there will be a table for independent and dependent students displaying the amount of people in the household. Okay. This again is just another screenshot that shows, and also that second question, the number of people in college, that was on a different page. We just moved it up because again, that is still synonymous with some of the household size as it relates to how many people are going, how many people will be in college during this particular timeline. Okay. This again is just the independent student question. So the household size. I'm talking way too fast. Pertains to certain questions. So again, how you answer will then share the questions you get, and then will ultimately still be calculated at the end with the table. This is again just the same thing. So you can just see the table summarizing the household size and members in the household. Okay, so those were the updates. There aren't a lot, but there are small updates that are happening. We're going to go through scenarios in a little bit, but I also wanted to share that it's important to know that the FAFSA can be accessed three different ways, right? Studentaid.gov, which has been integrated with FAFSA.gov. So when you used to put in FAFSA.gov, you would go to the FAFSA form. We integrated studentaid.gov, which is the resource online for parents and students with FAFSA.gov. So you can go in there, apply for federal aid, and the FAFSA form will come out because there's a lot of information in studentaid.gov. So that's the desktop. You can also go to FAFSA.gov. If you literally take out your phone and put in FAFSA.gov, you can literally view the FAFSA on your phone just like it would be on the desktop. That's the second way. The third way is our mobile app. So we have a My Student Aid mobile app. It is a free mobile app. You can go to the Apple Store, you can go to the Google Play Store, download the mobile app. So that's different than just looking at it online. If I put in FAFSA.gov right now or studentaid.gov, it would come up on my phone. The My Student Aid mobile app has to be downloaded, and there's a lot of other pieces to the My Student Aid mobile app. You can view your loans. You can view your loans online as well. But we wanted to give individuals different places where they can go fill out the form. You can start on one space and complete and end on another. So if you started on your desktop and you're on the My Student Aid mobile app, it'll pick up right where you left off. They're interchangeable. So it's really important. And then you can also, I believe, view your SAR on your mobile app as well. So, and correction. So we just want to give people a unique and universal experience when it comes to viewing their information in various places. Okay. Okay, and then COVID-19 updates. So I know a lot of you have heard about the loan repayment or suspension of loan payments, the 0% interest rate. So It started back in March of last year. It was extended to September, then it was extended to December. The last extension will be January of next year. Okay. It is not going to be extended any longer. People are like, oh, maybe it'll get extended. Maybe the President Biden will. I know everyone's like, he'll just completely forgive loans and eliminate student loan debt. I wish you all, but I just don't think that's going to happen. It might. You never know. But for right now, I need you all to understand that the return to repayment for your loans, for the loans of students and families, will take place in January. Now, people are like, what do we need to do? How is that going to work? The student's loan servicer will reach out to them and give them instructions. Now, here's the other thing I need people to understand, because people are like, how much are my loans going to be? They're going to be exactly the same. So if a student in March had suspension of loan payments and the amount was 30,000, the amount to start up again after January 31st will be 30,000. It has not changed. It's not decreased, it's not increased. It is exactly where it stopped last year, okay? And so protocols will be provided by loan servicers. If the student is not sure what's going to happen, they can absolutely follow up with their financial aid office. But the loan servicers, and we are also going to obviously provide some type of messaging to help students as it relates to who they need to reach out to regarding the return to repayment for their loans. Okay. We do have a website on our studentaid.gov page where you can get information about the return to repayment and any coronavirus issues, like how do I know if my loans qualify. There is still, I mean, we're in September. There is still, if people are not sure if they qualify, I'll be very honest with you. I have actually still been paying my loans off because every loan, if it's a federal loan, yes, but my particular loan was sent to it. So I had a federal loan, it was consolidated, but it was sent to a third party. So my loans technically didn't qualify. So I've still been paying all of my wonderful loan payments throughout this time. I'm sure some of you, I hope, have been taking advantage of the 0% interest rate and the suspension of the loan payment. So again, most of the loans, if they're federal, apply. If they're private loans, they still probably will have to pay because it is coming through a different entity. But we do have a webpage for more information. Okay. Okay, so here is where we're going to do some scenarios, because I think that it's really important to understand what information is needed on the FAFSA and really talk through some circumstances. I know that there were some questions provided regarding undocumented students and, who's the parent. That always comes up. So let's try to go through some scenarios. And I apologize, Jessica. I think you're on. So for the scenarios piece, there are multiple choice questions. So are people able to use the chat to put the answer that they think it is, and I can just look at the chat? Is that fine for people to respond that way? Okay, perfect. Okay, good. So we'll do that. We'll do it that way. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Okay, so here is the first scenario. My parents do not want to provide their information on the FAFSA form and are not going to contribute to my college expenses. Is this considered a special circumstance? Let me give you the choices, okay? Yes, choice A, yes, your parents are always right. Choice B, yes, since your parents aren't allowed to not provide information. Choice C, no, just because they don't want to give information doesn't make it a special circumstance. Or D, it depends. What do you guys think? Let's see what you have to say in the chats. C, no, just because they don't want to give information doesn't make it a special circumstance. Okay, okay. C, no one says A, yes, your parents are always right. No, okay. For the most part, sometimes they are, right? So most of you, I think you guys are saying no. Just because they don't want to give information doesn't make it a special circumstance. So in most instances, think you guys got it. Yeah, it is funny. Most parents do think they're always right. And D, and someone said D, it depends. So your parents for the most part are right, but when it comes to financial aid, it can be tricky. Um, so here, I wanted to go through the circumstance. Your parents, for the FAFSA form, if you are dependent, we need parental information. Okay, we're gonna go through whose parents' information. If your parent is biological or adoptive, right? and I'm going to just throw things out there because that way it will kind of talk through some things, because I'm sure people are like, but who's the parent? If your parent is biological or adopted, so if you've been adopted by someone, that's your parent for FAFSA purposes. You put them on the form. If it's your biological parent, but let's say in certain instances, you don't know, you're not with your parent, right? And there's something called special circumstances where maybe your parents are incarcerated, maybe unfortunately your parents are deceased. If it's a special circumstance, the financial aid office will still award you financial aid without parental information. But every circumstance is not a special circumstance, right? Every circumstance is not a special circumstance. So if your parents don't, so if you are adopted or your biological parents don't want to give the information, they don't have to. If it is not a special circumstance, you only qualify for unsubsidized loans. Okay? Now that's tricky because it's like, okay, well, mom, dad, I need your help. I need your help. So this is where, and I think for you all, you probably have come up with these circumstances where you can't force parents, but you definitely, I would encourage you all to say, hey, look, the FAFSA form is tied to so much other aid. So we talk about the FAFSA being federal aid, but we know there's state aid, there's institutional aid, there's scholarships. A lot of times the FAFSA is required to get the other additional free money that folks want. So I always like to encourage students when they tell me their parents don't want to help and it's not a special circumstance, just emphasize to the parents that, college costs are high, unless they have it, there are a lot of other institutional aid, state aid that is tied to the FAFSA. So filling the FAFSA out doesn't necessarily mean it's just going to be loans, and maybe you only qualify for loans for FAFSA purposes, but there's some other free aid from other entities that can help, right? So yeah, so you guys got it. You guys got it. Okay. I've got a couple of other ones. Let me see if I can throw you all off, okay? So here's another one. I live at home with my mother and step parent. I know I need to report information about my mother, but do I need to provide information about my step parent? Choice A, no, just your mom. Choice B, just your step parent. Choice C, actually your biological father who doesn't live with you. D, yes, if you have a step parent who is married to the legal parent whose information you are reporting. What's the answer? This goes all over the gambit. Okay. Okay. So you all don't need me on this call anymore since you all know the answer. So I'll just drop off and you all can just continue doing the amazing work you're doing. So yeah, so you all say D. Yes, if you have a step parent who is married to the legal parent who's reporting his information you're reporting on the FAFSA. So absolutely right. We get a lot of instances where a student is the custodial parent. So the custodial parent is who you're living with the majority of the year, right? The custodial parent. You're living with mom, and mom has remarried, right? So mom and stepdad are providing support to you. I'm pausing there because I'm gonna talk about another scenario. So if mom and dad are providing support, even though mom is biological, stepdad's information is also needed on the form. So some people say no, just your mom. No, it's absolutely the step parent as well. So they say just a step parent. Well, no, by default, it's got to be both people that are taking care of you. Now, the biological father is a whole nother instance. And I just want to make sure. So let's say your parents are divorced or separated. Okay. If your parents are divorced or separated, whose information are you putting on the form? So I talked about the custodial parent, the person you've been living with the most, right? So if you're living with mom the most of the year, let's say mom is not remarried. Mom and dad are divorced. Mom is still single. If you're living with mom most of the year, you're going to put mom's information if mom and dad are divorced. Now, let's say you've spent time, so I always say it's like a 7, I can't add this morning. 7 months out of the year you're with mom, 5 months out of the year you're with dad. You're going to put mom's information on the FAFSA form. But let's say you split time equally. You're living with mom and dad and they're divorced. So this is where it's whoever's providing the most support. So it's something called a 51% rule. So because you could be living with mom, right? But dad is providing tuition for school, books, food. So for choice C, when it says your biological father, if the parents are divorced, if the parents are divorced, you're living just with mom, and the biological father is providing the most support, then that's who you would put on the FAFSA form if they're divorced. We're talking about a completely different scenario. This particular scenario is about if mom is remarried. But when you do have parents that are separated or divorced, it is the parent that has provided the most support. Now, let me also say this to you all. That does not mean you all decide that. You let the parents decide that, right? Because a lot of times, the student is like, well, I'm not really sure. I live with mom, but I want to put dad. Those can be very tricky situations. Okay. So again, it's if they're divorced, who's providing the most support. If a parent has remarried and you're living with that parent who you're putting on the form, um, you need step parents information as well. I kind of went around that the long way. Oh, someone said, please remember to place any questions in the chat. Okay, perfect. Okay, here's a good one. I am the grandmother and legal guardian of a student. Can I fill out the FAFSA form in the place of the parent? Choice A, yes, your grandmother is now your adoptive parent. Choice B, yes, your grandmother is your legal guardian. Choice C, no, only biological or adoptive parents can fill out the form. Choice D, no, legal guardianship determined by the court makes you independent and you are not required to provide parental information. So all of you have been spot on for the first two questions. Let's see how you all decide what you want to put down for this question. Okay. Okay, I see B. B, B, B. Oh, everyone is being very consistent. I applaud this group. You all are being extremely consistent. I am not getting, okay, I see a C. Okay. I see a B. I see a D. Okay. So I'm going to go through each one. A, yes, your parent is now your adoptive parent. So we just talked about biological or adoptive parent. This is legal guardianship. Legal guardianship and adoption are two different things. Okay. Even for FAFSA purposes, I want to make sure you guys understand that. Legal guardianship is something that is court ordered. Okay. Adoptive is literally that person is taking on as your parent. Legal guardian is not necessarily, again, it's court ordered. So grandmother in this is not the adoptive parent. Now, I want to ask, I'm super curious. For choice B, a lot of you said B. Yes, your grandmother is your legal guardian. Okay. So for FAFSA purposes, it has to be court ordered. So I just want to make sure I understand. For everyone that said B, if your grandmother is your legal guardian, are we putting her down on the FAFSA? Can you all just say yes or no? For all the Bs, just say, are we putting grandma down because she is a legal guardian on the FAFSA form? Just put yes or no. And then I'll go to C. So C, only biological or adoptive parents can fill out the form. Well, we talked about that. So here's my question. Let's talk this through. I said only biological or adoptive, right? Grandma is legal guardian, but that's court ordered. She's still not biological or adoptive. So for all the yeses, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to put her. Now, choice D says no. Legal guardianship determined by the court makes you independent. That's the right answer, by the way. And you are not required to provide parental information. So let me say this. When you talk about independent status, there's certain criteria. You're providing more than half support, homeless, a ward of the court, legal guardianship, court ordered. So if you are under legal guardianship and it is court ordered, okay, what's going to happen is you all know about verification. The school is going to ask for supporting documentation. Once you provide the school that, the student is actually considered independent and no parental information is needed. So legal guardianship is one of the criteria for independent status for FAFSA purposes. So you actually would not put grandma's information at all. Same thing with if it was an aunt or if it was a sister. A lot of times people are like, oh, I thought I'd put her down, even if it's a legal guardian. Not the case. Same for homeless. If you're homeless, I know there's something called McKinney-Vento. I don't know if you all have that in Georgia, but usually there's supporting documentation, a ward of the court. It's something called, you all know, if you don't know about verification, the school will ask for supporting documentation. A lot of that stuff is court ordered, and each school will ask for different documentation. It's not going to be the same for every school. Okay. So in this instance, grandma would not be needed because the student would be independent. Now, let me also throw in, and I didn't talk about this in the last scenario, who you put down on your taxes. So a friend of mine called me and they were like, oh, grandma put my friend's child down for their taxes. So grandma's filling out the form. Let me say this. Who puts you down on their taxes is not an indicator of who you put down on the FAFSA form. Now, let me just take it to mom and dad, right? Mom may actually put down the student for their taxes or claim them for their taxes, but dad is still providing the most support. People claim people for their taxes for various different reasons. So please don't use the taxes as the indicator. Start with the custodial parent, who the student is living with the most during the year. If they split time equally, it's the parent that's providing the most support. Now, the parent that's providing the most support might be claiming them on their taxes. That's fine. But a lot of people default to, well, whoever claims them on their taxes is who you put down, and that's not necessarily true. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well. Okay. Okay, I kind of got you guys on that one. Okay, here's another scenario. Can I update my FAFSA information if me or my parent lost our job due to COVID-19? A, no, you can't make corrections to your FAFSA form. B, yes, you may be eligible. Follow up with your financial aid office. C, yes, go ahead and change your tax info from 2019 to 2020 if applicable. D, none of the above. So can I update my FAFSA information if me or my parent lost our job due to COVID-19? I think someone wrote, can you put your court-ordered guardian even though not required? No, you wouldn't want to. This, okay, let me see. B, yes, you may be eligible to follow back up with your financial aid office. So you can make corrections. We just talked about the update to corrections. So you can absolutely make corrections. You would definitely follow up with the financial aid office. So for the 21-22 cycle, which is the cycle we are currently in, will you all tell me what tax information is necessary for the current cycle, the 21-22? What tax years information are we all supposed to be putting on the FAFSA form right now? You all tell me what years information for the 21-22. So for the 21-22, this is, oh, wow, okay. Well, see, this is very interesting. You all are saying 2020. So that is not correct. So for the 21-22, the current cycle, it's something called prior. You're putting 2 years back, or that's why we call it prior, 2019's information. So we made a change a couple of years ago where instead of doing 1 year prior, we decided to use tax information from 2 year prior, because a lot of times people were not doing their taxes, or there was a significant change. So, or people had done their taxes, so they were using the same tax information to not prolong the getting in tax information. Remember, the FAFSA used to come out in January. People didn't get their W-2s until the end of January. So then we moved it back to October. So right now, for the 21-22 cycle, you're actually supposed to use 2019's tax information. Now, I'll talk about 22-23, which is the upcoming cycle. But for the 21-22 cycle, you're using 2019's information. Now, a lot of people unfortunately lost their jobs due to COVID. If there was a financial situation on the FAFSA form, it says 2019's tax information. By no means should you just put in 2020's information. Like, let's say you're unemployed and you're like, you want to use that because there's a significant change in the financial circumstance of the parent and or the student. You would call the financial aid office. They will let you know how to proceed. You would actually still put 2019's tax information, but then follow up with the office and say, hey, look, I provided 2019's tax information, but 2020, I lost my job. There was a significant change. The school will look at all that information to determine the award package for the student. So by no means should you go in and just say, well, 2019, I was working, but then 2020 I wasn't, so I'm gonna put 2020's information because that's gonna help my child. Do not do that. You still are required to put 2019's tax information and then follow back up with the school. Okay. Now for the new cycle, right? The 22-23, which is literally coming out in, I can't count, 9 days, 7 days, between 7 and 10 days. For the 22-23 FAFSA, which tax information are you going to put down? What years? For the 22-23. So 2022-23, exactly. You're going to put 2020's information. Now the same caveat's going to apply, y'all. In 2021, where we are now, there might be a significant change. You still need to put 2020's information and then follow up with the school explaining where you are now with 2021. The school may or may, so again, every situation, so I won't call it a special circumstance, but you just need to follow back up. But for the FAFSA, it's going to say 2020. See, this was a good question because I think people get confused about, and we have two cycles going. The 21-22 cycle is going to go through next year, But then the 22-23, which is going to be for school for individuals that are going to school in the fall of next year. That's what the new cycle is going to be. The aid will be assessed for, because people are going to go to school in January of next year, or the summer of next year. That's why the 21-22 is still up. But for the fall of next year, that's where the 22-23 cycle is starting, which is going to be literally in a few days. Okay. Okay, good question. We talked about a lot there. Okay, here's another question. I am a student with U.S. citizenship, but my parents are undocumented. Am I? Oh, wait. Okay. I'm not sure if I missed this, but what if you use 2020 taxes for, well, if you're saying you put down 2020 taxes for the 21-22 school year, you put that in the FAFSA. You either need to make corrections. The school may have noticed it, they may not have. If you did that and the school hasn't said anything and you received an award letter, um, you may have to make a correction. I would suggest making the correction. If you make the correction, will it impact your aid? It may or may not. It's really all dependent on the school. So if you did that and you didn't realize for the 21-22 that you were supposed to be using 2019's information, you can make the corrections. You can change it. Will it impact the amount of aid the student the student may receive? Yes. You can always follow up with the financial aid office and tell them what happened, and then they'll give you some direction as well. Okay. 21-22 will be for 22 grads if they start school on summer, correct? I think you're saying for the summer of 22. You're welcome, Deborah. I think you're saying for grad. I have to look at that. Well, I'll come back to that question. Just so we can kind of stick on the scenarios. I think you were asking about for the summertime. But I am a student with the U.S. citizenship, but my parents are undocumented. Am I eligible for federal student aid? If so, how do I fill out the form? So the student is a citizen, but the parents are undocumented. Here are your choices. A, yes, but you can only include your information. B, yes, but you have to call the financial aid office for more information. C, yes, your parents will need to use zeros and provide requested financial information. Print out the signature page. D, yes, but if your parents don't complete the info, you only qualify for unsubsidized loans. E, all of the above. What do you guys think? Deborah, the answer to your question is yes. Right, you're not sure. I know. This could be a lot of different things. Um, So I'll go through each one because it's kind of a little bit of everything in this question, right? So we talked about D, right? Yes, if your parents don't complete, you only qualify for unsubsidized loans. So let me say this. If you are a citizen, you absolutely qualify for federal financial aid. DACA or undocumented students unfortunately still do not qualify for federal aid. However, I don't know how the state of Georgia works. I know that some students, if they are DACA or undocumented students, qualify for state aid. Oh, I'm sorry, they qualify for institutional aid or in-state aid. So they will. I'm so not saying this right, but there's additional aid provided to them, whether by the state or by the institution, and they would have to find out. But for federal purposes, there is not for the student if they are undocumented. Now, the parent will absolutely. So the default is, and I'm sure some of you have done this. C, your parents. So if the parents are undocumented, they put zeros in. They print out the signature page because they won't be able to go through the FAFSA online. They don't have a social security number, but if they put the zeros in, you print out the signature page, you send that in, the school will still create an award package and send it to the student. Okay. Um, you will definitely still have to probably follow up with the financial aid office if you want more information regarding what other aid is available. So the follow up with the financial aid office is to see if there's other aid. Let me also just say this. I always encourage people to follow up. Oh, Georgia is one of the most restrictive states. That's really unfortunate. Don't get any state aid or in-state tuition at all. Do they get the option of in-state tuition? No, and they're forced to pay out of state tuition. Got it. You just answered my question. Let me also say this. I think it's also very critical, whether you're documented, undocumented, to have students follow up with the financial aid office. I tell students all the time, my friends who have, kids, that I'm like, the first thing they need to do when they get to school is go to the financial aid office. When the student receives a award package, I always say, let's say the award package, let's say the cost of attendance is 50,000 and the award package is 20,000. You can always follow up with the school and say, hey, is there any additional aid for this student, right? Because even though the award package says 20,000, that's what they're providing. You fill the FAFSA out, you provided all the information on the front end. But it doesn't hurt to just say, hey, is there more institutional aid? I had a mentee who went to North Carolina A&T, no, who went to FAMU, then transferred to North Carolina A&T. But when she went to FAMU, she was a stellar student in high school and she only received loans. And I said, no, you need to follow back up with the school. And when she followed back up with the school, may have been an A&T, they found more assistance for her. But if she hadn't followed up, she wouldn't have known. Because I'm never going to encourage a student to go to a school that's just going to offer them loans, right? You really need to look at the various options, which is why we always say, you can put up to 10 schools at a time on the FAFSA. Each school is going to offer a different amount of aid. So it's really important to look at a variety of different schools because each school, even though you may have your first choice may only give you $10,000. Your second choice may give you something close to what the full cost of attendance is. Here's another thing that I always like to say, because people assume that financial aid is going to cover everything. If the full cost is 30, when you fill out the FAFSA, you're going to get 30,000. Not true. It'd be great if it covered the full cost of attendance along with scholarships, along with, in-state aid. Loans still count. But sometimes there's a gap. So if the full cost is 30, you may only get 15, which means there's a gap of $15,000. That student and family has to figure out where they're going to get that money from. That may not come from the school. And that's why every year you're applying for the FAFSA, because each year you might get a different amount of aid. So it's not a one and done application as well. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Here's another scenario. Do I have to create an FSA ID for each one of my children attending college? A, yes. Each student requires a different FSA ID from the parent. B, no, I can just use the same FSA ID as my children. C, no, you, the parent, need to only create one FSA ID account for each child. D, none of the above. I threw a lot of different things in there. So what do you guys think? I see A, I see B, I see A, I see C. No, the parent, you need to only create one FSA ID account for each child. That's a little confusing. I probably need to change that up a little bit. So the answer is A. Each student requires a different FSA ID from the parent. So a lot of times people get confused. So the parent put my hand up. The parent needs an FSA ID. Let's say that the parent has 2 children in school. There's 3 different FSA IDs. So student A needs an FSA ID, student B needs an FSA ID. So all 3, they cannot be the same, okay? Both the parent needs a unique FSA ID and both students. So they can't use one FSA ID for both children, okay? Each one needs a unique FSA ID. Now, choice C says, no, you, the parent, need to only create one FSA ID account for each child. So the parent is going to, that's a little confusing. The parent is going to have an FSA ID and sign using their FSA ID, but each child, they're going to have to sign a different FAFSA. So they can't put both children on one FAFSA. That's what C is getting at. I'm going to reword that. But the reality is you're going to fill out an application for student A. The student is going to sign and the parent is going to sign. You're going to fill out an application for student B. The student is going to sign. The parent is going to use the same FSA ID, but there's 2 different applications, not one application for both students. Got it? So again, it's really important to remember that. And again, the FSA ID is a username and password. It is something that hopefully the parents will get. They can create it right then and there in the form. The students can create it ahead of time. I always tell them maybe do a screenshot because they forget it all the time. So it's really important. It also has to be, there has to be a social security verification, but you don't have to wait for that if it's a first time FAFSA. You don't have to have your FSA ID right then and there. You can sign and submit before it gets verified. And then once the verification happens, you're good to go. Okay. So yes, FSA ID is not going anywhere. I know a lot of people are like, oh, we really don't like FSA ID, but it's staying for a while. Okay. Okay, and here I think is our last scenario. What happens if I forget my FSA ID username and or password? A, you won't be able to receive any financial aid. B, oh, we have a few minutes left. Okay. Oh, we have 3 minutes left. Okay, you know what? I lost track of time. So what happens if I forget? I'm gonna go through resources really quickly. But if you forget your FSA ID, username, and or password, you can retrieve your username and password using a verified email address and verified phone number. You don't need an email address. That's another question or myth I need to dispel. it helps to retrieve it, but it's a username and or email. You don't need the email address. People are like, no, you absolutely do. It's not required, but it's helpful to retrieve information. Okay. And then we talked about undocumented students. They're not eligible for federal aid, but you can check with the financial aid office to see if there's any institutional aid. And then very quickly, I'm going to go through some of our online resources. We have Facebook, we have LinkedIn, we have Instagram, we have YouTube and Twitter accounts. We also have a 1-800 number. You can call that number at any time if you have any questions, if you're working with students and families and you're not sure how to answer various questions, okay? We have a demo site, you all. The demo site is a way to practice the FAFSA form. I sent Jessica these slides so you all can use the link. The 22-23 demo is going to come out this coming Sunday. So you can, the 21-22 demo site, you can practice now, but the 22-23, if you want to see questions, see what we talked about with the table, you can use that. There are materials online, a sample SAR, sample PDF FAFSA is on our website. And then there's something called the Federal Student Aid Estimator we're launching on September 26th. FAFSA Forecaster, some of you have heard of. We are replacing it with a tool called the Estimator. It's going to do the exact same thing. We're just renaming it the Estimator. Okay, this is going to help estimate eligibility and other financial federal student aid for students. Again, it's just going to be in place of the forecaster. We have a webinar on 22-23 FAFSA updates literally on Thursday of next week. I encourage you all to, so I kind of did a high level overview. They're going to go into the weeds about some of what we talked about. Please sign up. It's a great webinar. And then we also have a partner email that if you want to get updates about webinars, I don't know why the image is not there. Please sign up. There it is. And then we have a boot camp in October. We have 6 webinars. We're going to talk about repayment. We're going to do a line by line demo. We will do, yes, I'll make sure you all get the links. I'll send this to you all. Maybe I'll put it in the chat for the boot camp. There's a September webinar. There's a boot camp in October that is going to be 2 days, 3 webinars throughout the day on a variety of different topics that we are hosting. So there's a lot of professional development that you all can take advantage of that we are providing. And then this is just, again, a recap of our social media resources. I have a survey link I'll send to you all. This would be really helpful. I need all the resource links like just flashed by the screens. Yes. So when you get the PDF, they'll all be in there. Okay. Perfect. Okay. I know that was a lot. I know we spent a little more time on the scenarios, but I thought it was really important to kind of go through some of those circumstances so we could kind of play them out. But I'm hoping this was very helpful. 11 o'clock. Yes, I will share the PowerPoint, the PDF. Yes.
You are a superstar, Maisha. Thank you so much. That was a wealth of knowledge and information. People here in the space were taking rapid notes. I'm sure the people online were taking notes. If you have a question, there will be an opportunity at the end. But if you have a question that she can specifically answer, here you can write it on the whiteboard and we'll call it out online. We'll post it in the chat. We want to make sure that everyone leaves here with the tools and resources to really go and help minimum 100 students each complete the FAFSA form. That would really be amazing. And so we're taking this pause. We're going to transition over to the Georgia Student Finance Commission to do the line by line. But please, while we have a national expert, if you have a burning question, don't let this moment or opportunity pass for you to be able to ask it at this time. So we're going to ask everyone to place your name in school and or organization in the chat. I was going to try to type it while I talk, but it's been a long morning, so just post it in the chat. And we really are super grateful. Maisha and I met on another panel, and she has just been so committed to hanging with us and helping us increase the FAFSA submission rates for students across the Atlanta metro area. Thank you guys so much. Please post in the chat your name, your school, and if you're Gear Up, we want to do a special shout out to anybody that's part of the Gear Up family. We got Don Cooper physically in the house with us today, so super excited to have you guys here. So we're going to turn the floor over to Georgia Student Finance Commission. Ms. Mindy Morrow is going to come up, and we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit, but get into the nuts and bolts of the line by line FAFSA, and then talk about some of the common errors that might come up as you are supporting students with navigating this process. And then we're going to close out out and talk about College Bound a little bit more. We've identified the 10 College Bound schools in partnership with Learn for Life and United Way of Greater Atlanta's College Bound initiative. And so we're going to be talking about the launch of our website, FAFSA is the Key. We're super excited about that. We're going to talk about the toolkit that we're going to have available for everyone. So don't go anywhere. At the end, we've got lots of good free stuff to give away. So hang out with us for a little bit longer. But at this time, I'll turn it over to Georgia Student Finance Commission.
Good morning, and thank you again for joining us. I am Mindy Morrow with Georgia Student Finance. I want to introduce my colleague who will actually be giving the presentation this morning, Miss Angie Wilson, who is an outreach representative with us. So, Angie?
Do you have the presentation set up?
Yes.
Good morning. There we go. Good morning. I'm Angie Wilson, and I'm here, and we're going to go through the FAFSA step by step. We've got a lot of information to cover. If we have any questions, please be sure and put those in the chat box, and let's go ahead and get started.
You're muted.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so how do you get federal student aid? These are the basic requirements. You must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. You do have to be a high school graduate or have your GED, be enrolled in an eligible program, have a valid Social Security number, and maintain satisfactory academic progress if you are receiving aid. Now let's take a look really quick at some programs. You're probably familiar with the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant is for undergraduate students with financial need. This year, the maximum amount is $6,495. Now, for students to receive the Pell Grant, they will be completing the FAFSA. They're going to put all of their family's income information on the FAFSA. The federal processor will determine what is known as expected family contribution, or we call that an EFC number. Keep in mind, the lower the EFC number, the more financial aid a student qualifies for. So a family or a student that has a 0 as their expected family contribution, that student would qualify for the maximum amount of financial aid because the family really doesn't have a lot of resources to help pay for college. The Pell Grant, that $6,495, is going to be based on that 0 EFC. As the EFC goes above 0, that Pell Grant amount is prorated. So the EFC for the current year, 2021-2022, in order to qualify for any Pell Grant, that expected family contribution would have to be $5,846 or below to qualify. Another grant is the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. This grant is for undergraduate students with exceptional financial needs, so almost just about have to have that 0 EFC. Pell Grant recipients would receive priority, and students can receive up to $4,000 a year under this grant. Keep in mind, funds are limited, so this is one of the main reasons a student would want to complete the FAFSA as early as possible each year if they think they may qualify for this type of funding. Then we also have the TEACH grant. This is available for undergraduate, post-baccalaureate, or graduate students who are enrolled in coursework to begin a career in teaching. Now, they do have to agree to serve as a full-time teacher in a high-need field in a public or private elementary or secondary school that serves low-income students. And students who receive this grant can receive up to $4,000, and then it becomes a loan if they decide not to teach. So that's definitely a good program for students going into teaching. And then we also have the Federal Work Study Program. This is available for full-time or part-time undergraduate or graduate students. They earn at least minimum wage, and these are jobs that are available usually right there on the college campus. These are great because they work around a student's schedule, and they're usually right there. If they're living on campus, they're right there nearby. But the thing to remember about work study, funds can be limited and jobs can be limited too. So students should apply as early as possible. And then the loans, of course, you always want to encourage students to put loans last on their list, but loans can be, very beneficial. They're available for undergraduate, graduate, or professional students. The amount that a student receives would depend on their grade level and dependency status. The maximum for undergraduates would be $5,500 that first year, for dependent freshmen up to $12,500. And then there's the maximum also for graduate and professional students. And then the PLUS loan, this is available for parents. Graduate students are also eligible for PLUS loans, or parents of dependent undergraduate students. They do look at a person's credit history for this type of loan, so there would be credit approval needed. And the amount under the Direct Plus loan would be up to the cost of attendance of the college minus the amount of any other financial aid received. Now, when you're talking with students completing the FAFSA, that is their first step in their financial aid search. And you want to encourage them and remind them that the application is free. There are some websites that will charge to complete the FAFSA, so make sure they understand that the FAFSA form is free. It opens up every October 1st, so as already said, it's going to open up here pretty quickly. The first step is for the student and the parent to create their FSA ID. They'll use that to log into the FAFSA, to be able to sign the FAFSA. If the student is dependent, one of their parents will also need an FSA ID. There are FAFSA completion events all over. We have a lot here in the state of Georgia. We have a calendar on GA Futures for events as well. And lastly, make sure that students understand they do not need to pay anyone to complete that FAFSA. There's a lot of help out there that doesn't cost them anything. We also offer a FAFSA checklist, and this is available on the GA Futures website. They can go under GA Futures. It's under the Resources tab, and it's under Marketing Materials, and this is a copy of that. Now, when do students need to submit the FAFSA? So if students are attending, so if you're working with seniors this year, that would be the class of 2022. If they are graduating in 2022 and they plan to attend college in the fall, so they're going to graduate in May and go into college in August, that would be fall of 2022, they need to complete the 2022-2023 FAFSA. That's the one that will open up on October 1st in just a few days. That will cover the terms of fall 2022, spring 2023, and summer of 2023. And again, the FAFSA looks back 2 years, so the 2022-2023 FAFSA would look at tax returns from 2020. Now, if a student is attending college in the summer, let's say they're graduating in May, this upcoming May, they're a class of 2022, they're going to graduate in May of 2022, and they're going to start college in the summer, immediately right out of high school. They're not taking the summer off. They would also need to complete the 2021-2022 FAFSA, because that would be the one that would cover 2022. That FAFSA ends after summer of 2022, and the new FAFSA would begin fall of 2022. That one is available right now. So keep in mind, any students who are graduating and immediately going to college in the summer, they need to complete both FAFSAs. Now, what is needed to complete the FAFSA? Social Security numbers, parents and students, if not U.S. citizens, alien registration numbers as well. Federal income tax returns and W-2s, and also other records of money earned. Keep in mind, if you're working with seniors of 2022 that are going to college in the fall of 2022, they're going to need their 2020 tax returns, students and parents. Bank statements, investment records may be needed. The FAFSA does ask some questions about any funds the student and parents have in their checking accounts, savings accounts, and their investments, records of untaxed income, that would be things like child support, and then an FSA ID to sign electronically. Now, as far as FAFSA deadlines, if you go on the FSA website and click on the state of Georgia, you really want to, it doesn't give us a state deadline. There's not a particular state deadline. Colleges will have their deadlines of when they want the FAFSA completed, and then the federal deadline is June 30th of 2022. Now that would be for the 2021-2022 FAFSA. So it's generally going to be the end of the financial aid year, which would be June 30th. Now, I believe it's already been covered of the different ways to apply for FAFSA. Of course, there is the app, My Student Aid. It's a very easy process. Students are able to zip right through the app. I've seen students they can go right through that app really quickly. It's easy, download it on their phones or tablets, or it can go on the website and go to the FAFSA or studentaid.gov website. Now, this is what the studentaid.gov website looks like. FAFSA is now housed under studentaid.gov. So actually, to get to the FAFSA, it's all under studentaid.gov. And once you're on studentaid.gov, you can click Apply for Aid, and that very first blue bullet point there, complete the FAFSA form. Now, you can also type in FAFSA.gov, and it will also take you directly to the FAFSA form as well. So that students can either go to studentaid.gov, click Apply for Aid, or they can type in FAFSA.gov and go directly to the FAFSA form. Now, it's going to ask students to tell about themselves and select their role. So in this instance, we're going to say I'm a student and I want to access the FAFSA form. The other options are I'm a parent filling out a FAFSA form for a student, or I am a preparer helping a student fill out his or her FAFSA form. Generally, if you're there with the student, it's going to be the student or possibly the parent. So we're going to say that we're a student. I'm a student. I want to access the FAFSA form. At this point, the student has two options. They can log in using their FSA ID, or they can create their FSA ID from here, or they can use personal identifiers to access the FAFSA form. So we're going to take a look at using the personal identifiers. So they would need to enter their information, put in their demographic information, and continue. I always encourage students to create their FSA ID and log in rather than using the identifiers. They can do this, but they still have to create that FSA ID in order to sign it electronically at the end of the form. So to me, it's much easier. Go ahead and create that FSA ID to begin with. Now, students can also create their account if they don't have an FSA ID, or they can log in. So in creating the FSA ID, if they select that option, they just click Get Started, and it's going to ask them to fill out some information. So they are going to create their own username and password and enter their email. Be sure to encourage students, especially students that are still in high school, to use their personal email. A lot of students will want to use their high school email, but once they graduate high school, that email will go away. And that using their personal email, that's how they can retrieve their username or reset their password in the future. It asks them for demographic information as well as some challenge questions. They will need to confirm their cell number and email. It's going to send them a code to confirm that. And of course, if they need additional help, they can always visit studentaid.gov. And just some FSA ID tips. Make sure that your student creates their own FSA ID and the parent creates their own FSA ID. They cannot use the same email. Each one has to have their own. And also keep in mind, if a parent has an older child in college, or if they've been to college themselves recently, they probably already have their FSA ID. Once you create an FSA ID, you cannot create a new one. So probably the biggest FSA ID tip I have is to have them write it down, save it in their phone, whatever they need to do, save that FSA ID. This is probably one of the biggest headaches of the FAFSA is students not remembering their FSA ID or parents not being able to access it. So very important that they keep up with it, write it down, save it. Okay, so we have logged in. We're going to start a 2022-2023 FAFSA form, and it will tell you the current status. In this student's case, it's not started, so they can start. Now, for students who have logged in using their FSA ID, a lot of this information is already pre-filled in, so they don't have to type it in again. And again, that's another reason why I encourage them to create their FSA ID first, because it pre-fills in a good bit of the first part of the FAFSA form. Also, there's no errors. Sometimes students use their identifiers and they think they know their social security number. They start it and then they create their FSA ID later, and then the two don't match up. It's just much easier to go through FSA ID first. They will put in their email as well as their phone number, and they would need to put in the email that they would be able to receive emails, that they'll be able to check. FAFSA will send the confirmation and other information to that email. And their addresses would go here as well. And then it's going to ask them about their residency. Have you lived in Georgia for the past 5 years? Yes, I have. And then it's going to ask them, are you a U.S. citizen? Yes, I am a U.S. citizen. Now, if the student answered no, I've not lived in Georgia for the past 5 years, it's going to ask, what is your state of legal residence? Students need to understand the state of legal residence is where they actually reside, where they live. Sometimes students get confused. Well, I'm from Florida, but you live in Georgia now, so that's your state of legal resident. Then it's going to ask, did you become a legal resident of Georgia before January 1st, 2017? No. Well, when did you become a legal resident of Georgia? Then it's going to ask some questions about the student education. So what will be their high school completion status? They're going to be a high school diploma. When they start college in the 2022-2023 school year, they will have completed their high school diploma. What college degree or certificate will they be working on when they begin the 2022-2023 school year? In most cases, it's first bachelor's degree. It could be associate's degree. It could be other undecided. One thing that students sometimes get confused about is graduate. Some think they're a continuing graduate. No, they're not a continuing graduate. Even though they have graduated high school, that's talking about graduate school in college. So it would either be first bachelor's degree, associate's degree. It could be certificate or diploma, but it would not be graduate level. Will you have your bachelor's degree? No. What will your college grade level be when you begin the 2022-2023 school year? In most cases, it's first year, never attended college. Now, keep in mind, the college grade level is not talking about how many years they've attended college, but what their actual level is based on the number of credits they've earned. So a student who has earned 30 credits is going in as a sophomore, 60 credits as a junior, etc. But in most cases, it's going to be first year, never attended college, first year. And are you interested in being considered for work study? Yes, no, or don't know, not sure. I encourage students to put a yes there. Work study is a great opportunity. Maybe instead of taking out loans, maybe they could work on the work study programs. That's always a good option. And then selective service. It does still have the selective service question on the FAFSA form. Are you male? If you are male, it will pop up a message. Most male students must register. That actually, as you've already heard, that is no longer a requirement for federal financial aid. Are you registered with the selective service system? Yes. If they put no, it will pop up, would you like us to register you? Now keep in mind, selective service is not a requirement for federal student aid, but it is still a requirement for state aid, for HOPE or Zell Miller. So if they're using the FAFSA to apply for HOPE or Zell Miller, then they need to make sure that they are registered with selective service. So even though it's no longer required for federal, it is still required for state aid. And then if they have a driver's license, I encourage students to put their driver's license number here. This just helps, it helps in determining their residency. And then there's a section on student foster care and parent education. So are you a foster youth or were you in the foster care at any time? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about foster care in just a minute. What is the highest school completed by parent one? Did they go through high school? Did they complete middle school? Did they have college? parent 2. And you may be wondering, well, what's the purpose of that question? In some states, it's my understanding that there is aid available if the student is the first person in their family to go to college, but in the state of Georgia, we really don't have anything that's based on that, but it is still a question on the FAFSA. Have you ever received student aid? Student aid, yes. Now, a lot of students will, they always ask, well, I'm taking dual enrollment classes. Have I received federal aid? No. Dual enrollment classes, that's state aid. So they have not received federal aid. And then it's going to ask about the drug conviction. Have you ever been convicted? Yes. And then it will ask a series of questions. But again, as you've already heard, that's no longer a requirement for federal aid, or that will not deny them federal aid. And then the high school, they do have to list their high school, and there are a couple of ways to do that. I encourage them to put in the information and then click the search button and let it pull up the list. But they can also, there's a new option, they can add the high school manually by putting in the information here. But again, just have them search for it and pull it up, select it from the list. I've seen students type in the name of their high school altogether with no spaces. I've seen them type in, if they're from, I don't know, for example, Gwinnett County, they type in Gwinnett County. You know, if there was a Gwinnett County High School, they would type in Gwinnett or Gwinnett High School. So it's easier to select it from the list. And the reason it's important to do this is because we have the FAFSA completion reports, the FAFSA completion reports available to schools, and we want to make sure that we capture the information correctly. So have them selected from the list. And then they will have the opportunity to confirm their high school. And then they are on to the college search, and this is a little bit different in the new FAFSA, but they can search for their college by the city or the state. They can select Georgia, they can click search, and it'll pull up all the colleges in Georgia. Or if they know that their college is located in Atlanta, they can select Georgia and Atlanta and search, or they can actually type in the college name. They can also search by federal school code if they know the federal school code. Most students do not, and it's easier just to do the search by looking for their college. They will see the list of colleges and they can select the college that they're interested in attending. Now keep in mind that students can select up to 10 colleges on the FAFSA. Even if they've not applied to 10 schools, they can still select up to 10 schools to receive their information. Once they have selected their colleges, then it's going to ask their housing plan, either on campus, off campus, or with parent. And then it's going to ask them their marital status. What is your marital status? They're single. I've had students say, well, I'm in a relationship. Does that count? Like, no, you're not married. You're single. Does the student have dependents? Do they have, now this one can be kind of tricky too. Do you now have, or will you have children who will receive more than half of their support from you between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023? I have had students who were pregnant at the time. Well, yes, I will have a baby, I will have a dependent, but if that student is living at home with parents and they're not working, they're not filing tax returns, you're not providing more than half of the support of that child. So in that situation, the student would need to answer no. I've only had maybe one or two situations where the student's like, yes, I actually am supporting my child. And in that case, they could answer yes. Then it asks about other dependents. And then these are your dependency questions. The questions are you serving in the military? Are you a veteran? At any time since you turned 13, were both your parents deceased? Were you in foster care, or were you a dependent or ward of the court? Or are you in an emancipated minor? Or are you in legal guardianship? In order to be independent, a student would need at least one yes answer to the dependency questions. If all of these answers are no or none of the above, then the student is considered, or if they're also, this is a no answer also, the student is considered a dependent student. Parent information will be required. So keep in mind, A student would need one yes answer to be considered independent. And I think this situation was already talked about earlier. For example, a student who lives with a grandparent, they are in legal guardianship. The grandparent has legal guardianship, or someone else has legal guardianship of that student. They would answer, yes, I am in legal guardianship. That makes the student independent, and parent information would not be required. But for most students, especially most high school students, they are dependent, and parent information will be required. Now, who is considered a parent? Again, I think we've already gone through this. A parent is a biological or adoptive parent. Again, you would never use aunt, uncle, brother, sister, grandmother, grandfather, whoever. And it doesn't matter who claims the student. Again, you're looking at a parent, biological or adoptive parent. If the parents are divorced or separated or not married, you're going to use the parent that the student lived with the most. And if the student, again, lived with them equally, you're going to use the parent that provided the most support. And again, if the student lives with someone other than parent, then they may possibly have a special circumstance, or they would have a yes answer back over on the dependency questions. So whose information should I provide? And the FAFSA here kind of breaks it out. My parents live together. They're married or unmarried, but they live together. My parents are divorced or separated, and I live with one parent more than the other. My parents are divorced or separated, and I live with both parents equally, and I was legally adopted. So you can click the little down arrow, and it gives more information about each of these scenarios. So in this case, we're going to assume that the parents are married. So you're going to enter they're married, and then put in when did your parents get married or remarried, the month and year. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, if a parent, you're looking for the parent that provided the most support, or the parent that the student lived with the most. And again, if that parent is remarried, you will also have to use step parent information as well. So you're going to enter the information for the first parent. And also you want to encourage students, make sure that they're using, as far as the parent's last name, the last name that is on their Social Security card. Some people will change their name, they'll get married, but they not ever change it with Social Security. You want to be sure that you're using the name that's on their Social Security card, because it does a match with the Social Security Administration, and that information has to match, or it will send the FAFSA back with an error. And then you're going to enter the information for the other parent. Now that could be, again, a step parent if that parent is remarried. And then it's going to ask about the parent's state of legal residence. And then the dependents. How many other dependents do your parents have? So it's going to ask, do not include yourself. How many other dependent children do your parents have? Well, I have 2 brothers and sisters. Okay, so you put a 2 there. How many other dependents do your parents have? This would be dependents, other dependents, if they live with your parents and they receive more than half of their support from your parents, and will continue to receive more than half of their support from your parents between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023. Most cases, most parents just have their own children. They don't have a lot of other dependents, but you could have students that would have something there. And here, this is the table. It shows yourself, the student, your parents, 2 parents, other dependent children. You have 2 brothers and sisters, and then you have 2 other dependents. So your household size is 9. So they've changed this. This looks a little different than it did in the previous FAFSA. It really spells it out. Now, out of the dependents in your parents' household, as shown above, how many will be college students? Do not include your parents, but do include yourself and other members of the household. So if the student has other brothers and sisters or other dependents in college, they're going to put that number there. If their parents are in college, they do not include their parents here. Now, on the flip side of that, if a parent is completing a FAFSA, they would include themselves and any children or dependents they have in college. So if you have one parent that's in college on the student's FAFSA, you're going to have 1 in college, that's the student. On the parents' FAFSA, they'll actually have 2 in college because they have a dependent in college. Now, I didn't mean to confuse you there, but just remember, do not include parents if the parents are in college here. Okay, and then this is asking about the tax filing status for 2020. Have your parents completed their tax return, already completed? What type of tax return? IRS 1040. For 2020, what is your parents' tax filing status, married, filed, joint? In order for that link to appear for the IRS data retrieval, the filing status of the tax return has to match the marital status. So if the parents are married, but they filed head of household, that status is not going to match. They're not going to be allowed to use the IRS data retrieval tool. So if they are married, they should be filing either married, filing joint, or they could be filing married, filing separate. But the marital status should match. It doesn't always. There could have been a divorce or separation or what have you. But in order for the IRS data retrieval to appear, the marital status has to match the tax filing status. Okay, and in this case it did, so the parent is eligible for the IRS data retrieval tool. And this is a very easy process. I encourage students to use the IRS data retrieval tool, parents to use the IRS data retrieval tool. It will go to the IRS and it's going to retrieve that information. It's coming from the IRS, so it's official. If the student is verified, is selected to be verified, and they do select a good portion of students who complete a FAFSA to be verified, if the tax information comes from the IRS, then they're not going to be required to submit tax transcripts in most cases. So it's good to use the IRS data retrieval. Plus, it's much easier. Parents are not having to search on the tax return to see what information to put there. Okay, and then to proceed to the IRS, you click proceed, and it's going to go out. It's going to leave FAFSA and go out to the IRS website. Okay, and to log in, this is the first place a parent would use their FSA ID. And this is to log into the IRS data retrieval tool. And this is a new, kind of a new look than the previous FAFSA because it actually gives the parent one name of the parent and parent two, which I really like because sometimes students forget, who did I put as parent one, who did I put as parent two? Well, this actually tells you. And then the parent would put in their FSA ID. If a parent cannot remember their FSA ID, they can go right here and click Forgot Username, or they can click Forgot Password and go through that process to retrieve username and reset password. Or if they don't have an FSA ID, they can actually click the link to create an FSA ID here at this point. Now we're guessing here on this screenshot that a parent was not able to go to the IRS. And by the way, on the IRS website, in order for the IRS, the information to, or in order for the system to find that tax return, parents would need to enter the address exactly as it is entered on the 2020 tax return. So if they've moved, or even if a word is misspelled, the name of their road was misspelled on the tax return, in order to find it on the IRS side, it has to match exactly. They have to type it in exactly. So in this instance, we're guessing that either the parent decided not to use the IRS data retrieval tool, or maybe the IRS couldn't locate their tax return. So they're going to need to enter it manually. So the first question, what was your parents' adjusted gross income for 2020? This amount is found on IRS Form 1040, line 11. So it tells them exactly where to look. How much did parent one earn and how much did parent two earn? Now, even if they pulled it from the IRS, it still is going to ask, okay, out of that information, your adjusted gross income, how much was parent one and how much was parent two? This is where very easy if parents have their W-2s. I can enter the information here because it is going to ask this even if the parent pulled it from the IRS. But they're going to ask, enter how much was parent one, how much was parent two, and then it's going to ask, enter the amount of your parents' income tax. Now, a lot of errors are made here. I've seen parents put, I earned $25,000 and, I'm sorry, let me go back. I earned $25,000 and, let me go back. I earned $25,000 and I paid in $25,000 was my income tax. Nope. Or I got $5,000 in a refund. Nope. It's asking for what was the actual tax. And it tells you to look on IRS Form 1040, line 22, minus Schedule 2, line 2. If there is no Schedule 2, then it's just a 0. So you're going to put the line 22. Okay, and then parent questions for tax filers. Did your parents have any of the following items? Combat pay, student college and grant scholarships, education credits, untaxed portions. Now keep in mind, if they pulled it from the IRS, all this is already pre-filled in. But if not, then they need to look on these different places on their tax forms to find the information. One of the ones that, a lot of these are uncommon, you don't really see a lot of them, but there is one in particular, and I believe it's the next to the last question. Sometimes you will see, is that the one? Yeah, I believe it's the next to the last question. Sometimes you'll see that. You need to look on the W-2s, or you can find it there. But if it's coming from the IRS, a lot of this is already pre-filled in. And then parent additional financial information. Did your parents have any of the following? Child support, earnings from work under a co-op, or taxable earnings from need-based employment such as federal work study. A lot of times those are 0. Now this is parent child support paid. It's also going to ask about child support received, but make sure you're reading it carefully. Did your parents pay child support? And then here is untaxed income. Did your parents receive child support? I think maybe this is the question I was thinking of earlier. It's the 1, 2, 3. The third one, that one you'll need their W-2s. Payments to tax-deferred pension and retirement plans paid directly or withheld from earnings. And you're looking for, it's on the W-2, boxes 12A through 12D, codes D, E, F, G, H, and S. That is very common. A lot of people have that on their W-2s. So don't forget, make sure that if you're helping a student, make sure they're looking on the W-2s for that information. A lot of times that gets left off. And then parent assets. As of today, what is your parents' total current balance of cash, checking, and savings? As of today, what is the net worth of your parents' investments, including real estate? You do not include the value of the home. A lot of times they want to know, as far as assets, well, do I include my car, or is that counted? No, you do not include your home or your car. And it's also going to ask about investments. Don't include a family farm or family business with 100 or fewer full-time or full-time equivalent employees. Also, you do need to include the value of the, you do not need to include the value of the retirement plan. So if all they have, maybe they don't have stocks and bonds, but they have a 401k, you do not include the value of their retirement plans. If you have any questions about whether to include something or not, there's little question marks beside each box. You click on those question marks and it'll pop up a help box. Now we're looking at the student. Has a student filed a tax return? In a lot of cases, it's did not file or not going to file. In this case, the student did file, and they filed single, and they actually are eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool. And there it talks about, yes, proceed with to the IRS, or no thanks. And if they decide not to go through the IRS data retrieval, it's going to do the same thing. They have to fill in this information. What is the student's income from work? And in this case, it's the example is if the student has a spouse, but it's going to ask for basically same information as on the parent side. For most students who are dependents, these are all zeros in the majority of the cases. The student's not receiving child support, they're dependent, so in all these cases, they're 0. And then it's going to ask also information about the student. Does the student have a balance in cash, checking, or savings? Do they have any investments? Most of the time, it's I found most students it's 0 or negative. But if it's negative, they'll say, I'm $10 overdrawn in my bank account, and you just put a 0. They don't have any investments, and they don't own a business with more than 100 employees. And then prepare. Are you a paid preparer? And this is rare, and I've never seen that. It's always going to be no, but in most of the time, this is rare, it tells you. And then it's going to give you the FAFSA summary. It lets them know you're not done yet. You still got to go through your summary, and this summarizes all the information that they put in. It'll go through every single question, make sure the student goes through and just kind of spot check. And you can see here in this view where the information was transferred from the IRS. It doesn't show any dollar amounts or any figures. It just says transferred from the IRS. And then there's an agreement of terms. I agree to the terms. Okay, and then the student can sign it. And then it lets us, the parent know parent signature is still needed. It's not been signed, and parent can click provide provide parent signature. And then it breaks it up, and I like this. This is new to the upcoming FAFSA as well. It says parent 1. This is parent 1. This is the last name. This is parent 2. So it makes it a little bit easier. So they can provide whichever parent, and only one parent needs to sign. Only one parent needs an FSA ID. Both parents do not have to have an FSA ID. And then the agreement of terms, continue. And here, also, a lot of times they will not have to enter, the parent will not have to enter their FSA ID if they link to the IRS, because it saves it, it's still in there. But if they didn't, they have to enter the parent's FSA ID here and then sign. Oh, one other thing I want to point out as well, down at the bottom, other options to sign and submit. Let's say a parent is undocumented and they do not have a social security number. Only a person with a social security number can create an FSA ID. So if you have that situation, you're dealing with parents who are undocumented, you're entering all zeros in the FAFSA, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, but you're entering all zeros. And then when you get here, you need to click other options to sign and submit. And then you would print a signature page for the parent to sign, and then that has to be mailed to the federal processor. Then you're going to get a confirmation page, and in that confirmation page, it gives a lot of information to the student. It lets them know, the confirmation will be emailed to them, and it lets them know what they qualify for as far as Pell Grant, how much they're eligible to borrow under federal student aid. It also gives them some information about the schools that they picked as well. Now here are some scenarios. There is a great document, and I've got a copy of it over there. For undocumented students, sometimes there's a lot of questions about that. Let me have that one. So this is available on studentaid.gov, and I put the web address down at the bottom, but it's a good handy tool to have when you're dealing with those type of students. So one of the big question, as an undocumented or DACA student, am I eligible for federal student aid? Keep in mind, undocumented students and DACA, and DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. They are not eligible for federal student aid. So a lot of times students want to know, well, do I still fill out a FAFSA? You cannot fill out a FAFSA without a social security number. However, DACA students may have a social security number. They can fill out the FAFSA if they want to. Maybe there's some other type of scholarship or something that it needs FAFSA information. So they could fill out the FAFSA, but they would not be eligible for federal student aid because the social security number would not be confirmed because they're not documented. So that's a question frequently with undocumented students. Also, what if my parents are undocumented? They don't have social security numbers. You're going to put in all zeros, and again, print that signature page. Now, parents sometimes will not have social security numbers, but they'll actually have an IRS tax form, and on that tax form, they'll have a tax ID number. You would not use the tax ID number on the FAFSA. It will kick it out with an error. It causes problems down the line. So if you see a number like a tax ID number and you're not sure if that's a social security number, you might want to ask, is this a social security number or tax ID number? You would not want to use the tax ID number. You put in zeros. Now, once you get to the end of the FAFSA with an undocumented, or if you put in zeros as the social security number for parents, it pops up an error when you get ready to submit, and it'll say something like, you reported income or tax return filed, but no social security number. You just click check for errors, and then it'll pop up an error again for the second parent if there's two parents. You click check for errors again, and then that error goes away, and you'll be able to continue with the FAFSA. But this is a great resource. A lot of information on this. So go to the studentaid.gov and print this paper. So here's another question, tax returns and W-2 issues. What if my parents have not completed a tax return in many years? Then the student will mark the appropriate box. Parents did not file or will not file the tax return. And then if they have income, it will have to be entered manually. Now, keep in mind, if they mark will file, the college has the ability to award aid for 1 semester on a will file status on a tax return, but they are not able to award financial aid the 2nd semester if the parents have not gone back and filed their tax returns. What if the student has lost or no longer has access to their W-2s from work? Then have the student, they can a lot of times contact their employer, or they can contact the IRS, I believe, to get a copy of their W-2. And then students also can manually enter their information on FAFSA about their income. But keep in mind, if they are verified, they will have to provide a copy of their W-2 to their college through that verification process. The dependency questions, I think we pretty much already covered this. Student of divorced parents, parent who student live with the most, provide information about the parent who provides the most support, use step parents as well. FSA ID issues. What if student or parent cannot access or remember their FSA ID, which happens all the time? They can use the options under forgot password or forgot username. Hopefully they used a good email. That's why it's important that they use a personal email and a cell number that they have access to. I can't tell you how many parents, I haven't had that email, I don't know my phone, I don't have a phone number, and they can't answer their security questions. So that happens. They also have the option, if they can't use the forgot username or forgot password, maybe they don't have access to their email, they don't have access to that cell number, they can answer those security questions. Keep in mind though, if they reset their password using security questions, there's a 30-minute delay. So they would not be able to use their FSA ID for 30 minutes. And if that doesn't work, they can always call or contact FSA. They can call 1-800-4FED-AID, and that's 1-800-433-3243, or they can go under studentaid.gov and go down to the bottom and click contact us, and there's a live chat. I have found that I've had a lot of success with the live chat, so that's very easy to use, and that's the way I would recommend. Questions about 529 plans? I don't know what's going on here. Yeah. Wait for the program. Well, let me find my notes on. Okay. All right, how are 529 plans accounted for in FAFSA? This is another question that comes up. If the 529 plan is owned by the student or the parent, it must be reported as an investment asset on the FAFSA. Distributions from the 529 plan are not reported as income on the FAFSA, and other 529 plans are not reported as assets on the student's FAFSA. That's if a grandparent owned the 529 plan, for example. They're not reported as assets on the student, but the distributions would be reported the next year on the subsequent year's FAFSA. So I guess I'm running out of time here.
I think it stalled it on the actual.
Oh,
Sorry about this, folks. We'll try to fix this. It stalled it on the. It like kicked you out, so we'll try it again. And you're fine. Sorry. Did it come back up? Okay. Okay, there we go.
okay. Is that, I
Mhm.
just use
Yeah.
this view?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So did everybody get that about the 529 plans? Let's continue. Homeless or unaccompanied youth. Can't see it that well. On the question about is the student homeless, is there a way to bring it back the way it was? Come back over here. Okay, so if the student answered yes, I am homeless, then they have several options. I'm just having trouble seeing that. If not, that's okay.
No, but I see what you're saying.
So if the student answers yes for the homeless question, then it's going to give them several options. Can someone verify that status? And in this case, the student was yes, my high school homeless liaison can verify that for me. So they can click one of those. If not, that's fine.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, great. I can see that a little better. Thank you. Okay, so if they answer yes, my high school or homeless school district homeless liaison can verify that. When they click continue, it says you are considered independent. Would you like to answer questions about parents? No. Okay, and if they answer yes that I'm homeless, but then they can't answer, well, high school can't verify it, director of emergency shelter, none of those fit, they would click none of the above. Then it's going to pop up another message, important. You indicated you were homeless or at risk of being homeless. You answered none of the above. And then your financial aid administrator can decide you meet one of these conditions. And there are your conditions. I'm not going to go through it because of time, but it will kind of give them an idea of, they may be unaccompanied or something like that, and they would click continue. Okay, now here's the impact of not providing parent information. It kind of gives them that statement. They can choose the appropriate option below based on circumstances. I am actually unaccompanied or homeless or at risk of being homeless and will not provide information about my parents, or, well, dadgummit, I guess I will provide information about my parents. I have students who think, they can kind of get away with something, put that I'm homeless, but, you got to be able to provide proof of that. Okay. And also, if the student, it comes up and they are dependent, so they've answered no to all the dependency questions, and it automatically will say, I will provide information about my parents. Well, they say, no, my parents aren't here. I don't have their information. I am unable to provide information about their parents. Well, it's going to tell them the impact of that. We will not transfer any parent information. We will not calculate an expected family contribution. You will be limited to only a certain type of loan, the unsubsidized loan. So I've seen students do that. I'm unable to provide because they're not here. But no, if you don't have parent information, stop right here, save it, go home, get your parents to finish their part of it. And sometimes there are special circumstances. A student doesn't meet, they're not in legal guardianship, they don't have a lot of these things, or there's some kind of special circumstance. Maybe they're staying with a friend, both parents are incarcerated, or something, I've seen all kinds of scenarios. If that's the case, then the student can, it tells him more information about the special circumstances, and it gives them to choose an appropriate option. I will provide information about my parents, or I have a special circumstance and I am unable to provide information. So that's like, I see this a lot with students who are living with someone other than parents, but that other person does not have legal guardianship of them. So it's just always been understood, I've always lived with grandma, but she doesn't have legal guardianship. Well, then you can check this. You have a special circumstance. You can provide information about that to your college. So students in foster care, answer yes to the foster care question in dependency section. If at any time since the student turned age 13, the student had no living parent, even if they are now adopted, or student was in foster care, even if they are no longer in foster care today, or the student was a dependent or ward of the court today. For FSA purposes, someone incarcerated is not considered a ward of the court. Now, the financial aid office is going to ask for some documentation to support this, of course. What happens after the FAFSA? We do have a great checklist out on GA Futures, and we have some copies for you guys that are here. We have some copies over here. A lot more information about what happens after the FAFSA. After the FAFSA, they can log back in. Usually it takes about 24 to 48 hours, something like that, maybe 2 to 3 days. They can log back in and it will let them know, hey, it processed successfully. What happens next? And then students have the option to edit or make a correction, or they can view the student aid report. Make sure that your students log back in and view that student aid report and read it carefully. It'll let them know if there's any errors in it, and that way they can complete all of that stuff early, take care of any problems, rather than waiting until after the college is in process. They can solve any problems early. How is financial need calculated? Financial need, when you talk about financial need, college has a cost of attendance budget, that's tuition fees, room and board, transportation, etc. They're going to subtract that expected family contribution that comes from the FAFSA, and that determines how much financial need they have. That determines their eligibility for need-based programs. These are your need-based programs: federal Pell Grant, FSEOG, direct subsidized loans, and federal work study. And again, all those factors from the FAFSA play into calculating that EFC number. And again, you don't include the family home, family farm. These are factors that are not counted in that EFC value of retirement accounts. Now, how do they calculate non-need-based aid? They take that cost of attendance and they're going to subtract any other financial aid the student may have, and that will give you non-need-based aid. These are some examples of non-need-based aid: the direct unsubsidized loan, the federal plus loan, and the teach grant. And again, sometimes there's special circumstances. Anytime a student has a special circumstance, they have to do their FAFSA based on the required year's tax returns. But if there's been a change in employment status, maybe they have a lot of medical expenses, maybe there's been a change in parent marital status, they were married, now they're divorced or separated, they have unusual dependent care expenses, or if the student just cannot obtain parent information, those are special circumstances. That student needs to take their documentation of their circumstance to their financial aid office. And then the financial aid officer is able to go in and possibly make adjustments to the income on the FAFSA and help the student qualify where they didn't qualify before. But again, that would all go through the college's financial aid office. Comparing financial aid packages, you want to make sure that the student has the college listed on the FAFSA. They need a complete verification, possibly apply for admission and be accepted before a financial aid package will be processed. And then this is just an example of what an award looks like. Students need to be logging into their college emails once they are accepted, and they will usually they'll given a username and password to log into their student portal on their college's website, and there's a financial aid section there. They can go in and take a look at their awards there. Now, I encourage students. A lot of times students, what they're offered is not enough. They need to fill in the gap. They need to look for scholarships. Possibly encourage them to find a part-time job, or maybe look at tuition payment plans. Colleges offer tuition payment plans in a lot of cases. Maybe they could go the route of additional loans, but definitely encourage them to apply for additional scholarships. Encourage them to reduce their expenses. Maybe they could look at a more affordable residence hall. Look at buying used books, or maybe they can reduce their meal plan. Maybe they don't need unlimited meals for 7 days. Maybe 2 meals for 5 days would work as well. Information. Always send your students to GA Futures. We have a module called College Money Matters on the website that is a great resource for budgeting. It has a lot of different tools out there. And at this point, are there any questions about anything? I can't see the chat. So.
I've addressed questions from the chat.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Well, that concludes this part. Our representatives at GSFC, our outreach team, we have a map on the website, and this has all of our contact information. We are available. We're glad to help you guys or help students, whatever we can do. Just let us know. Thank you so much.
All right, we can do a physical hand clap here, but a virtual hand clap online. I say we have put together the roadmap, guys, to really make sure that we can help support students line by line with getting their FAFSA application completed. I hope that you took some information today that will be useful in your schools and your communities. We will be sharing, again, the resources after the session, because we're not holding the information. We really want to be a good steward of financial aid planning resources. At the beginning of the pandemic, the Scholarship Academy team sat down and said, what would it look like if we really created healthy financial aid cultures in the communities that we serve? And so a lot of that work is built into what we're doing with the College Bound FAFSA Submission Initiative this year. And so we are really going to be rolling out some resources, some tools. Our program director, Jeremy Toulon, is going to share with you guys the items that we have in the toolkit. But we tried to make it simple for the region. We're going to have a FAFSAisthekey.com website that's going to be talking about all of the college-bound events that are coming up. And again, it's in collaboration with United Way of Greater Atlanta's college-bound program. Learn for Life is also here. We got Damian in the house, Damian Ramsey in the house from Learn for Life Network. And we believe that college funding is a community affair. And so it's co-ownership, and how do we make sure that we're all really doing our part to increase the FAFSA submission rates. If you're not aware, they're under 50%, guys, in some districts at 40. The average is about 40%. And so I think as college advisors, as student support services, we can really collectively change the narrative about how financial aid happens to students in our region. So FAFSAisthekey.com. We're still playing around with a few things, but that site, it will be where you'll be able to download. We put together a 30-page toolkit that has a sample lesson plan that you can use in your schools. It talks about why FAFSA. We've got some other items that are really going to be useful and helpful, and it's just for everybody to use. We want to make it so even if you're in a county and your school wasn't selected this year to be a college-bound school, we still have posters, we still have wristbands, stickers, and really just pumping the message that FAFSA is the key to unlock debt-free degrees. I'm not going to steal Jeremy's thunder. I'm going to let him come up and talk about kind of some of the items. Oh, maybe I already did. That are available for access. And then we really just want to present a challenge. So if your school, for the college-bound schools, you guys have already committed, it's documented, it's MOU status. For schools that are in our target counties, that's Fulton, Clayton, DeKalb, and Gwinnett. If you are have not been selected as a college-bound school, but if you're an organization in any of those communities, we want to invite you to take the pledge and join us. We're saying 50 to 100. If we get every organization to commit to 50 to 100 additional FAFSA submitted for this term, I really think that this time next year we'll have an amazing story to share. So Jeremy, you want to talk about what's in the toolkit?
Thank you, Jessica, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to stand a little bit back from the computer so everybody can see what I'm holding in my hands. And so Jessica has really championed this initiative, I would say, amazingly. She's been sort of the brains behind everything we've put together for you. And like she said, we really did put together a toolkit. It is literally going to come to you in a box. So this may look familiar to you if you've ever had to sell after school candy or anything like that, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Little Leagues, but unfortunately there's no candy in this one. I am disappointed personally. But you'll see we have some awesome partners, like Jessica's already mentioned, Learn for Life, Verizon, and of course United Way partnering with this initiative this year. And so when you actually receive your toolkit, if you do sign up to be one of our FAFSA champions, as we phrase this work, you're going to receive a number of things inside of here. So the first one is the sort of I voted stickers. So we're going to have a bunch of stickers in here. I believe there'll be a couple hundred per toolkit. They basically say FAFSA is the key. They also provide the website information, FAFSAisthekey.com. That website will be extremely important because throughout this next year, that's where we will actually be listing all of our active activities and submission events. So you will see the FAFSAisthekey.com on pretty much all of our branding this year. We will be pumping that out pretty much as we can moving forward. You will also receive a bunch of participation rubber bands. So these rubber bands will be basically for participation, if they show up at events, if they show up in your individual classrooms, whatever sort of spaces you're looking to actively connect and work with your students, you'll be free to give out these rubber bands, please. The next thing is we will have what we are calling our FAFSA pledge cards in here as well. So one of the first things, sort of activities you'll see in your toolkit booklet is basically explaining to students why FAFSA is so important. So we know the early pre-work sessions that we do and that effort we put forth early on in getting students to understand FAFSA and the impact it has for your students, I should say, excuse me, and for your parents as well is really important. So we will have these available in English and Spanish. So on one side, it's basically saying that they take the pledge to submit FAFSA by January 1st. And then on the back, it actually gives them sort of their first step that we heard today, which is creating their FSA ID. All right. So these FAFSA pledge cards are going to really be awesome. And there will be multiple sort of versions of this stuff available. In your packets, you will have these things available in English and Spanish. But if you do have a population that you feel you need to touch, such as a different language, whatever language that may be, let us know. And we can definitely arrange to have those items printed and designed for you as well. The next two large items you'll receive if you do sign up to be a participant in the FAFSA Champion Initiative are going to be wall posters. And so again, these will come in English and Spanish versions automatically, but if you do need another language, or for instance, you need some different material, please let us know. We're happy to work with you again. So we'll be asking our participants to basically put these in high traffic areas. So we'll be looking at cafeterias, gymnasiums, school entryways, exitways, etc. And so one of them is just a sort of a general go out and complete your FAFSA, you can do it today type poster. But then the other one is actually 5 reasons you should submit FAFSA. So this one will be sort of really nice for students. If they're passing by, it'll give them sort of daily just another brief introductory or brief information piece to understand why FAFSA is going to be important for them that last year. And then the only other item that will be included is going to be the College Bound Resource Guide. And so this is bound and covered. This is about a 40-page, I would say, toolkit, workbook. It has everything you will need in it to be successful in this initiative. And when I say everything, I mean everything. So there are lesson plans for parents and students on why FAFSA is important and helping them submit FAFSA. We also have social media templates. We have sample agendas for in-person and virtual workshops. Literally, you name it, it is in this 40-page toolkit. And if the information is not in here, then I will create it for you personally, and we will make sure it gets to you on time. All right. So please, I have dropped that link in the chat. If you are a leader of a school or organization that was not one of our target schools this year, but still would like to receive some of these services, please make sure to sign up on that FAFSA Champion link, and we will make sure to get this to you as soon as possible. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Jessica, and I'm going to take my beautiful toolkit and walk away.
All right, we know we are over time. If there are final questions, you're welcome to post it to the chat. But the Georgia Student Finance Commission has office hours. There are tons of resources. Can we just take a moment to thank them for sharing the space with us today? We are super excited and grateful to the Georgia Student Finance team for doing the line by line. Again, you know, it's not a one and done. You can go back and watch it. Use the FAFSA demo tool. All of that information is helpful. They're asking you to drop the link again. And so now it's commitment time, right? So you heard all the good stuff. You got all the information. We want to know who's in and who is ready to help us to unlock debt-free degrees for students in the Atlanta region. So if you're in, you can post just hashtag I'm in the chat, and we'll make sure we can get your information to reach out to you. If you're physically here and you got pumped up about FAFSA and you want additional resources, that includes corporate volunteers. So we're training a host of corporate volunteers over the next month. And so if you already have something happening and you want volunteers, we are happy to make sure that they are available for an event you're having in your area. The only thing we ask is that you share the data with us. So we don't know what happened and we don't get numbers back. And so you'll see the tracking forms. We have a registration and an exit ticket that captures all of the information we need. We want to be a resource, but you know, data sharing is super critical. So the only thing we're asking is for you to share the results of your individual event with us so that we can do this work together. There's going to be a FAFSA tracker on the FAFSAisthekey.com website. So we'll be tracking for the 10 schools that we're doing a deep dive in, what those numbers are looking like. And then you can post your results online as well. Super excited. Thank you again, Georgia Student Finance Commission. Thank you, Maisha Challenger from U.S. Department of Ed. Thank you, United Way. Thank you, Learn for Life. I think that's everything. All right, turn it over to Melissa.
No, we're fine. That's if people want to turn their cameras on. We can take like a picture.
Oh, perfect. So if you guys want to turn your cameras on really quickly, we can take a picture. We're going to do a picture with everybody for the social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to hold up anything like while they're up there?
Yeah, our yard sign.
Yeah.
I'm following you. Yay, look at all those great people. Look at all those. Somebody hold my sign.
Right. One, two, three. Thank you.
Thanks to the eyes closed.
Right.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. We appreciate you logging in today. Have a great day.
You all are welcome to some of the materials on the table.
Bye, everybody.